Welcome everybody to Reptales, our Friday night stream where we tell our tales about our reptiles. We're very excited that you're here tonight because we have a special guest. But before we get started, I want to introduce our panel. We got Bob from Kaler's Aquatics and Reptiles, Mike's Aquatics and Things, Pam, Sketchy Paints, not pants, paint. And then here's our guest, Frank from the Geeky Gecko Creations. So we should have an awesome show tonight. As you guys know, we're just a bunch of fish keepers sitting around, enjoying life and loving our reptiles. And we don't do too much on our regular channels and our regular programming because for some reason YouTube doesn't like when we mix fish and reptiles, but we're breaking out of that. So we have this Friday night live stream where we talk all about reptiles, talking, getting people interested in reptiles, beginners and experts alike, breeders, sellers, and I'm pretty excited that we're here tonight with our special guest. Now, do you want me to call you Frank or Geeky?
You could call me Frank, the Geeky Gecko, or Gecko Boy. They used to call me Gecko Boy at work, so.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
I love that.
That was when I worked in an office before I work with reptiles now, but.
So let's see if I can figure out how to do this.
Yeah, I was just going to grab a gecko real quick.
He's going to grab a gecko, and we're going to watch him grab a gecko. I'm pretty excited. I'm looking forward to anybody. Oh, hey, Dragon. If anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try to catch them. Oh, my goodness. But right now, we're going to look at some reptile candy here.
Yeah, candy.
Tell us.
So this is pretty rare for the gecko world. An all-black gecko like this is sort of the higher end of the projects. You know what I mean? I'm sure you guys have high-end projects in the aquatic world as well.
We do.
So I'll just have her here. She was a breeding female that was losing a little bit of weight in her group tub where she was. So whenever the females do that, I'll pull them from the group and then give them their own isolated cage to regain weight. And now she's fine. This is like a healthy, like stockiness of what you want to see for a leopard gecko, you know? So fat tail, kind of stocky body, that kind of stuff.
So when you say in her community, do you have a whole bunch of these black geckos and that's what you're reproducing, a whole line of them?
Yeah. So I can actually, let me put her down for a second.
That's so cool.
And then
who on the panel here has geckos?
I do.
I have a couple of leopard geckos myself. Pam, do you have? Oh, you have the turtles. Mike, do you have any geckos?
I've got one leopard.
Beautiful.
All right, so this. Let me just turn the camera around here real quick. I practiced how to do this, so this should go smoothly. Can you guys see the other facing way now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so
look at that.
yeah, this is a typical group of 4 females that I will set the geckos up in. This one's so dark you could barely see it against the substrate here that she lays her eggs in. But there's 4 females in this group, 1 big water dish that I change out once a week, a giant food bowl off to the side here, and then calcium dish. And then, you know, sometimes they're just going to poo on the lid, but that's fine. The good thing about leopard geckos is they live in a dry environment. So like all of that poo and stuff, as long as you clean it once a week, it doesn't cause any like bacteria or respiratory issues like you get with some humid species sometimes, you know?
Right. And what is in that food dish?
So what we feed them is just mealworms. You can feed leopard geckos dubia roaches or crickets or silkworms or horned worms. But as a breeder, we just feed them mealworms, and they love mealworms. Leopard geckos absolutely love mealworms, and so they'll just gobble it up, and they'll keep their weight nice and chunky for the breeding season. I don't know if do you guys know much about mealworms?
I know their end product, the beetle, I use in my biotopes, my bioactive enclosures. I don't know the difference between a mealworm and a superworm, though.
So I'll show you another thing about mealworms real quick.
Aren't they smaller than superworms?
Yes, they're definitely smaller than superworms. But another reason why breeders will use, let me flip the camera around again. I wish there was just a quick button where I could flip the camera around, but I gotta like go into settings and then flip the camera.
Yeah.
So one of the main differences between mealworms and superworms.
You don't have a refrigerator filled with worms.
This had like 200,000 mealworms in it just a little while ago, and I'm getting more in today because I ran out. But the mealworms, you can store them in a refrigerator at, what temp is this? 49. As long as they're 40 to 50 degrees in here, they will go into a hibernating state where you could just take them from the fridge. They'll last in here for 3 months. You don't have to feed them, put substrate in them or anything. They'll last in here for 3 months, just like that.
Oh my God,
And when you want
to,
yeah, and when you want to feed a gecko, you just bring a bowl to the gecko room and feed them that way. That's it, straight from the fridge, straight to the gecko. Now you can't do that with superworms.
Okay. I also noticed you had a dish of the calcium powder, where I'm used to putting the calcium powder on my my insects,
oh yeah,
the dragons and stuff. Why do you have it in a dish by itself?
So the reason I have a dish of calcium powder by itself is because these are breeding females and they could use the extra calcium. So there's calcium in here with the worms because the worms eat the calcium and then the geckos eat the worms. But leopard geckos are actually known to eat calcium by itself. So that's why for breeding females, I'll have a separate bowl of calcium so that the females can make their eggs better during breeding season. If the gecko is not breeding, like these are 2 juvenile geckos growing up in here. If they're not breeding, they just get the one main bowl with the mealworms and with the calcium, and that's it. They don't get the extra calcium bowl unless they're breeding.
So
no crickets. Sorry, Susie.
Oh, I'm sorry. What do you look for in your breeding couples that you know that it's time to separate them? Like
okay.
Sometimes you have to pull one out if she's being.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can definitely talk bluntly and honestly about this because I'm the type of person that would rather educate honestly and people know what the actual situation is, and then they can make a decision of what they're okay with. You know what I mean? What they're comfortable with ethics wise. Leopard geckos are typically territorial animals for the most part. Males, I've never tested this, but I've heard that if adult males are kept together, they'll fight to the death or really bad kind of thing. I've never tested that. I've never seen video evidence of that. But that's the word in the hobby. And so nobody really tries it. It's just one of those things that people just kind of stay away from, right?
Right.
But when it comes to keeping breeding groups, like I just talked about, a lot of people will do 4 females in a breeding group because females are not as territorial as males are towards each other. So they can typically live together in a group of 4 in a bigger tub, and then I'll drop the male in, leave him in there for about 4 to 5 days, and then remove him and put him to another group of girls, Yeah, so in 4 days, he'll breed all of those girls, and then he'll move to another group or go back to his tub if I have no one else for him to breed with. This is called group breeding. It's really, really popular with crested geckos, but it's not as popular with leopard geckos because leopard geckos have sharper and bigger teeth than crested geckos do. So when crested geckos, yeah, when crested geckos are kept together, like the females, they may get a little territorial towards each other, but their biting and their fighting is not as bad as what leopard geckos can get.
Okay.
So what I noticed, I converted this year to 100% group breeding. I took about 200 to 300 females that were all individually kept in their own cages. Like you see these own cages, like these smaller. There's still some females in here that were not breeding, or they're not in groups. I used to breed one-on-one. So I would have a female in one tub, a male in another tub, just housed by themselves. And I would put the male in the female's tub, watch them breed for 10 minutes, remove the male, and then that's it. She has all the sperm that she needs for the year to lay 20 eggs, right? I used to do it that way. But when you start to breed 500 animals, you have to look for a different way of doing things. And so what the biggest breeders do is they do something called group breeding, which is 4 females in a tub. And as long as the females are getting along, they can stay together. So that's where the removing thing comes in, is if I notice biting or peeling of the skin, because sometimes the leopard gecko females will bite each other and they'll peel the skin a little bit. If I notice that, then it immediately goes on my watch list. If it gets worse or if it stays consistent, then I'll find the aggressive female and remove her, or I will remove the female that is potentially getting beat up on, you know what I mean? And move her into a tub where she can heal and be on her own for a little while until she heals back up, you know? Does that make sense? Did I answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I only have one more follow-up question, and I'll turn it over to everybody in the panel because I know everybody has so many questions for you. Can you show us pretty quickly, how do you tell the difference between a male and a female?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And then I'm sorry, guys. I've never seen anything like this. This is great.
Now, because this camera quality is not the greatest, if you were to do a Google search, leopard gecko male versus female, they have some very, very clear pictures. But it's very easy to tell. When you're looking at the bottom of a female, there is a row of pores that will take place right before her cloaca, right before her anus. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's going to be blurry, but
right there,
right there, you would see a V shape of about 20 black pores. Let me show you what a male looks like, and you'll know it immediately.
I gotcha.
Hey Mods, will you find his website and post it?
I think he already did, but yeah, post it again,
awesome.
Man.
The camera, the angle, the lighting.
I very distinctly see 2 lumps at the base of the tail.
So the lumps is definitely something you want to look for, but do you see those pores? Those black dots in between its hind legs.
Oh, kind of like a smile. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like a smile. There's about 15 of them, 10 to 15. Males have those very pronounced. Like you can see them clear as day, like it's a black pencil dot. With females, it's very, very faint and hard to see, almost like invisible or transparent. And then, like you noticed, males will also have the 2 bulges. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. But the reason why you don't want to go by the bulges alone is because some females have bigger bulges than average females, right? And so you don't want to go by the bulges. What you mainly want to look for is the V, the shape of the V-shaped pores.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
A smile. I'll call it smile-shaped pores.
Are they called femoral? I know on bearded dragon they're femoral pores.
I do believe you're correct, and they are femoral pores. But if somebody knows more than me, they can correct me. Now, I keep my rooms at ambient temperature, so this room right now is probably about 86 degrees or so as the sun is hitting this window. So if you see me like dabbing my sweat, it's hot in this room.
All right, so many questions. I'm going to let other people ask questions as well.
Yeah, I don't do hot spots anymore. I used to do 90-degree hot spots with heat tape, supplemental heating. I just heat the entire room. I have a room dedicated to leopard geckos. I heat the whole room to 85 degrees. I have a ceiling fan that's normally on 24/7, but I shut it off for this stream because of the noise. And that keeps the temperature in this room consistent. And then, of course, I have a room heater. You see that room heater at the very floor? That is attached to a thermostat, which controls this room to stay at 85 degrees,
85 degrees. I would be
80. Yeah. Hey, it's a little bit of like a sauna workout when I come in here. And
Yeah, I guess
Wow.
so.
Wow.
That's amazing. Now, how long before by the time they start breeding till that they lay eggs? Where do they lay eggs? How long do they incubate? Do they need to incubate? Go ahead.
yeah, definitely all of that. So a leopard gecko goes from baby to adult in about 6 months, which is really, really cool because
Wow.
you can work your projects very quickly that way. You know what I mean? But if a female is 6 months old, and let's say she starts ovulating, there's a typical weight that you want to look for her to be at before you actually just start breeding her, especially if you're new. If she's 55 to 60 grams at 6 months old, then that's typically the weight that you would look for. If she's not, then you might want to wait. But here's how leopard geckos work. Once a year, a female is going to start ovulating. And I have videos of this on YouTube showing what an ovulation looks like. I'm a very visual person, and I love it when you can visually tell when an animal is ready to breed. It just makes it that much simpler, right? Leopard geckos is so clear when the female is ready to breed. You look at her belly, just like this, and you will see two pink dots, bright as day, bright as the sun. You'll see two pink dots in her stomach, and that's how you know when she's ready to pair with the male. What those two pink dots are is they're called ovulations. It's the beginning stages of an egg. They're going to grow and grow and grow for a 2-week period, and you want to pair her as soon as you see those ovulations, because if she's not paired to a male, she'll reabsorb those ovulations and then start ovulating again she'll do that about 6 times for the course of 3 months. Does that make sense? So from the time she starts ovulating, she will grow those ovulations and reabsorb them, grow them and reabsorb them, unless you pair her to a male. If you pair her to a male, those ovulations will not get reabsorbed. They'll turn into eggs. And only 2 weeks later, 2 to 3 weeks later, you'll have eggs. Like, she will be laying eggs every 3 weeks for you. And then you move those eggs into the incubator. The really cool thing with leopard geckos, they're temperature sex determined, meaning if you incubate eggs at 80 degrees, you could produce 100% females. So if you're trying to expand let's say you have a really expensive gecko like this. This could be like a $3,000 gecko, and you want to make more females to be like this because they're really expensive. You could incubate all of her eggs for females that year, and then in 6 months they're going to grow up into breeders, and you could breed all of those females. But yeah, if you incubate at 80 degrees, you're going to get 100% females for the most part. I've gotten 100% females. If you incubate around 89 to 90 degrees, you're going to get about 75% males. So the success rate is not as consistent as with the females, but you can still incubate at higher temperatures to get males at a higher percentage. And if you incubate at 85 degrees, you're going to get about a 50-50 mix of males and females. So pretty cool.
Yeah, that's way cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is my Halloween theme. I figured wearing my orange shirt with the black and yeah.
There you
So
go.
this is called the Black Knight morph, in case you you guys didn't know.
Now, how many generations can you use the same siblings before you have to introduce a new.
Yeah, like inbreeding. Leopard geckos have been in the hobby for about 30 to 40 years, and we got them from the Middle East. So, needless to say, we have no open trade with Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, where these geckos are from. So, the DNA that we have in the hobby and the original animals that we imported from the wild, I don't know how many that was. It could have been 500, it could have been 1,500. I don't know how many animals were originally imported, but those are all the animals that have been circulating in the hobby for the past 40 years.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
if you know anything about reptiles, reptiles are not like humans. If you take like a human dad and he has a baby with his daughter, the babies will be highly defective within 1 to 2 generations, you know? But with reptiles, you could breed reptiles back to their parents like 20 times in a row, and you will see minute forms of defects. Now, that being said, because leopard geckos have been in captivity for like 40 years already, we've already inbred them a lot to a certain degree.
Right.
For the most part, you could still breed geckos like 5 times in a row.
Okay.
But what I suggest to people, you know, like brother to sister, mom to son, dad to daughter, you could do that like 5 times in a row. But what I suggest to people is if you start to see defects of shorter faces, shorter bodies, overbite, you know what I mean? Backwards arms. If you start to see defects like that, then you'll want to immediately start outcrossing because that bloodline is very condensed already. So you want to start moving it to a separate bloodline. You know what I mean?
Okay. And you said once they've been inseminated, they carry that sperm for a whole year.
They
And then
carry
it's
that sperm
gone?
for the next 3 to 4 months for that whole season. Yes. Now, leopard geckos and reptiles have also been known to do something called retaining sperm. So she could have a baby, she could have sperm inside of her from 2 males ago. You know what I mean? But on the technical side of things, most of the time, a girl will deplete that male sperm by the end of the season. So once 3 to 4 months goes by, she'll get rid of all of his sperm, whether she's laying good eggs, bad eggs, or you know what I mean? Whatever she's doing, she'll deplete that sperm so you could pair her to a new male the following year. But it's good to keep track of the males because let's say she pops out a baby 2 to 3 years later that was not a baby genetically with the male that you last paired her to, you know where that sperm came from. That's very possible. Reptiles have been scientifically studied to retain sperm up to 2 years, maybe even longer, you know?
So I know in the aquarium hobby, like if you're talking guppies, once they're in with a male, like that's it, they're ruined. I can't line breed them anymore. There's a good chance they got something else in them forever.
Oh, okay.
Like so, it's interesting. Now, why was asking, what's your favorite morph?
So Black Knight is my second favorite morph because I don't know who doesn't like a black gecko. If somebody doesn't like a black gecko, let me know. I've never heard of anyone yet. But if you don't, that's okay. It's not everybody's is their cup of tea. But I mean, there's just something to the black geckos. However, like the shirt I'm wearing right now, it's really hard for me to not put Tangerine as number 1. You know?
Oh my gosh, is that the one you held up a few minutes ago?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring him back out.
Ooh, he was a beauty.
Yeah, this was a $1,000 Tangerine that I brought into our collection about a year and a half ago. Last year, guess how many females he bred last year?
5.
500.
50. Yeah, 50 or I bred him to like 50 or 60 females, and I repaired him. So what I did not mention earlier is I like to repair females because it ensures that they have the most amount of the male's DNA inside of them. So when you're breeding leopard geckos, if you put the male with the female and you watch them breed, one of 2 things is going to happen when she's ovulating. Never do that when she's not ovulating. If she's not ovulating, females will fight males off. if they're not ovulating, and their bites can get pretty serious. So if a female's ovulating, you put the male with the female. What's going to happen is one of two things. He is going to start courting her, and she will receive him at that very moment, or she will reject him. If she rejects him 3 times in a row, or for 60 seconds in a row, whatever comes first, because he's going to continue to pursue her, right? Like stubborn, like human males, we don't get it. We want to pursue the girl, even if she's giving us signs that she doesn't want anything to do with us, right? The male's going to pursue the female over and over and over again, even if she doesn't want to breed, which is why I don't like leaving a male with a female alone overnight. I've been sent pictures by people that had a male with a female in a giant 70, no, it was a, you know, those giant 40-gallon tanks, like the 40-gallon breeder tanks? That's huge. Yeah, that's huge for 2 leopard geckos. The male with 1 female in that size tank overnight. I had a follower of ours send me pictures. The male ripped the female's arm off. The female bled out and died 3 days later.
I got
So
you.
that's why I don't like leaving males with females alone overnight. But if you leave a male with 4 females and the first female runs away from him, he will chase after the other girls. And I haven't seen any serious issues with that scenario. You know what I mean? So that's why 1 male with 4 females is the way to do it, if you're going to be leaving the males in overnight with the females. But if you're watching them breed, what I used to do is I would watch every single gecko breed. And that's the best way to do it. If you got a small operation, that's the least risky way to do it, is put the male with the female. Well, first remove everything from the female's cage. Remove her humid hide, remove her water dish, remove her food bowl. Otherwise, they're going to knock that stuff all around, right? So you you remove all that stuff. You drop the male in with the female. And like I said, he's going to start rattling his tail, and he's going to start love biting her. He's going to start biting all up and down her body, but in a gentle way, in a nipping way. She will receive him at that point. But if she does not receive him, I give him 3 chances to subdue her, because sometimes a female will reject the male on attempt number 1. Sometimes she'll reject him on attempt number 2, but she'll receive him on attempt number 3. She will submit to his breeding. So he gets 3 opportunities to subdue her, or 60 seconds to subdue her. If either one of those don't happen, I'll remove him and try on a different day. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sometimes the female just doesn't want to breed that day, you know?
Right.
So does he have his own home?
He does have his own home. Yeah. So all of, you see all of these smaller tubs? That's where a male is housed individually. Can you see his caging here?
Yeah.
This is an individual male's cage. He has his humid hide, he has his water dish, he has his food bowl, and he will go back into his slot when he is on break or when he's not breeding any females. And you can see this male here too. See this male waiting? They love to be pet on the head. I don't know what it is, but if you also touch the tip of their nose, they'll give you a little lick. They're super cute, super cool species to work with.
Can you, Frank, talk about the breeding stuff? Is fascinating, but we're kind of catering to people that are just thinking about getting a reptile and getting in the hobby and that kind of stuff. So kind of going back to, I see your setups they don't require any UV light, obviously. And you're heating the whole room. Is that the way you're doing it?
Yes.
Is that why it's so hot in there? Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been criticized for that by some people in the hobby, because they think that's neglectful, or they think that that's something that wouldn't work. But I've done it now. I've done room heating for about 2 years now, and it's perfectly fine. And I also know that there's a lot of very successful breeders in Indonesia and Asia and those warmer, the Philippines, like those warmer climates. They don't use any heat source or anything over there. They just have a giant room that's whatever tropical temperature, right? Like, so like 83 to 87 degrees. And as long as the leopard geckos are digesting, this is the biggest thing. If a leopard gecko does not have warm enough temperature, they will regurgitate their food. So I have not seen any digestion issues with 85-degree temperature. All the leopard geckos have perfect poos, perfect digestion, and all of that kind of stuff. And if you think about it, a leopard gecko in the wild will oftentimes be found in ambient temperature places like holes in the ground or rocks or caves, or when they come out at night after the sun has gone down, they will just be walking around the ambient temperature. And so to me personally, I don't think it's that big of a deal to do ambient temperature. If I notice any issues with it, any issues, I talk about the good, the bad, the ugly in reptiles. I talk about experimentation and trying things different way. I talk about all that. If I noticed any issues of it, I would have stopped a long time ago because this is my livelihood. I don't have another job. I need healthy animals. I need good-looking animals. I need an operation that works for me and produces live, healthy, bearing animals. And so I would have changed it a long time ago if I noticed any issues. But I got to be 100% honest. I love it. I love the ambient room temperature. It's just, it's less electrical risk. I don't know if you've seen any reptile breeders that have had fires in their facility. There's been a lot of reptile breeders that when you're sliding those tubs over that heat tape time and time again, year after year after again, a lot of those heat tapes go bad and wind up causing fires, and some people lose their entire collection due to fires. So yeah, I'm not talking down about heat tape. It's a great way to go if you're not heating your room. But to be 100% honest, I love the ambient room temperature. I think it's efficient and cheaper and less risky in the long run, all those kinds of things, you know?
Oh, for sure. And two things. You mentioned that it's your livelihood. And what I was wanting the mods to post, I haven't seen it, maybe they did early on, was your website that has your things listed on it. What is the website?
So it's geekygecko.creations.com.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And we just
people
made
be
a
able
new
to find
website. I don't know if you guys have experimented with WordPress, like how to build a website, or Shopify, which Shopify already builds the website for you in a way. I spent hundreds of hours learning how to use WordPress, but then just recently, I learned that for me, Shopify was going to be a much better website engagement. So we just redid our whole website. It's super easy to navigate now, and I would love feedback on it for anybody who's interested in geckos or wants to check it out. I think it's a lot better to navigate this new website than it was our old website, you know?
It was pretty easy to navigate.
I saw that you had just revamped it and were promoting it. Now, when somebody watching that might want to get a pet gecko, not necessarily to breed it or to run a breeding operation, what do you recommend? I know what I do for my four, but what would you recommend for just a hobbyist to heat their gecko?
So believe it or not, I love over the tank. I love a tank setup. If you're just a pet hobbyist and you don't need to worry about housing 1,000 animals within like 2 to 3 rooms of your house, you know, when you start to scale larger, you need efficiency. You can't. But if I only had a few geckos, I would do a bioactive setup with like a 10 or 20 or maybe even 40-gallon tank, and I would use over-the-top heating, heat lighting, and I would probably actually even use UVB. I know that UVB is not needed for leopard geckos to digest their food, but if it wasn't an efficiency thing, to me, it would just be nice to have UVB light for the reptile.
Yeah.
And there's actually a lot of studies now, with the increase of science and knowledge, they're starting to study the effects of UVB on reptiles, even reptiles that don't need it necessarily. You know what I mean? And they're starting to figure out that reptiles benefit from UVB, even if certain species don't need it. Like ball pythons don't need it. Leopard geckos don't need it. Crested geckos and gargoyle geckos don't need it. But they're even skinks to a certain degree don't need it. But they're starting to have different studies to show that it is beneficial if you can provide it for your animal with the right dosages. So I would love a heat bulb, a UVB setup, and a tank bioactive setup. That would be my preference if I was only a hobbyist keeping a couple of geckos,
Right.
And it just looks better, right? Like it just looks 100 times better. You can have fun decorating your tank, watching your leopard gecko hunt different bugs that are in the tank and those kinds of things,
What is
Sure.
the humidity level supposed to be at?
So the humidity in this room, I'm in Arizona. Bam Bam Geckos is in Nevada. He has a very similar environment. And I just saw a question of him. Bam Bam, the tangerine gecko that we were showing, that was our Mandarin Tango Crush OG tangerine that we brought in many years ago. But the humidity in this room is only 28% right now. Very, very dry. Yeah. But what I do for every single gecko, so let me see if I can show this here. Every gecko has a humid hide that I use Eco Earth, or in my case now, have you guys ever been to Home Depot and seen the organic peat moss that they have there? That's essentially the same thing as Eco Earth, but it's 10 times less cost. And so since I have an operation that's large, I look for efficiency of cost. So I use the organic peat moss that has no fertilizer or chemicals or anything in it. I use that. And even our babies, every single gecko in our operation gets a humid hide, even the babies. And I was going to show you.
How many geckos do you have on site, do you guess?
How many geckos do we have here?
Yeah.
I think we have close to, it's got to be, I've lost count, but it's got to be 600-700 leopard geckos or something right now.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe more. Now, this is the tub we use for babies getting set up. Let me see here. Can you kind of see this tub? So the babies, you can kind of.
And they know to crawl in that thing?
Yep, I have a hole right there.
Cool.
That I cut with an X-Acto knife. And then I duct tape over the lip because, whenever you cut plastic, it could be a bit sharp. And I don't want the geckos, when the geckos are first born, their tummies are a little more sensitive than when they start to grow. So I cover everything with duct tape, and then they get their humid. You see their humidity in there, and you see that they're in here, right? They love the humid hides. Leopard geckos love their humid hides, whether they're baby geckos or adult geckos.
And can you tell if they're boys or girls at that age?
No, you cannot.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there is, I use these disposable 1.5 ounce dishes from webstaurantstore.com. That one had poo in it, so I'm gonna change it out since I'm right here. And then I also use these 2 ounce disposable dishes for babies. I have a video on my website of how we set up our babies, but
what about the eggs? How do you set them up?
Good question. Let me go show you.
While you're traveling there, I had a question from the very start, and I'm going to forget it. You're feeding the mealworms, but I didn't see any crickets or hear you mention crickets.
Oh yeah, you mentioned crickets. So the thing with crickets is they're harder to keep alive than mealworms.
For sure.
They require more work than mealworms, and they're also known to carry pinworms and certain parasites, whereas mealworms are not. And you can't store crickets in the refrigerator for 3 months and not take care of them, right? You have to like constantly take care of them. So for me personally, as a breeder, I only do mealworms. But if I was a hobbyist, I would love to see my gecko hunting crickets and those kinds of things as a hobbyist. You know what I mean? But as a breeder, I just do mealworms.
Okay. So if I adopted a gecko, which I just have adopted a full-grown gecko who has never been handled, how hard is it going to be for me to take him from a crazy hissing critter to something I could handle?
Is he a leopard gecko?
Yes.
Usually leopard geckos calm down by the time they're adults. If he is not calm, that means that he just has a little bit more agitation in his DNA, which happens sometimes on occasion, or he had a bad household where he was like kind of abused a little bit and he just learned to be on edge. Either way, we have some videos on YouTube of how to tame your leopard gecko and handle your leopard gecko. But what I do is open-handed handling. So letting the leopard gecko sit in your hand and crawl from one hand to the other hand with very slow movements, being very gentle with the gecko. If you do that for long enough, he will most likely calm down in time. Leopard geckos are really, really great at calming down, and they make a great pet for that reason. But if he had a bad past, I absolutely think that he can come around. Just let him sit on you. Let him sit on your leg. Let him sit on your hand. Be very slow with your movements to start building that trust with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Here's our eggs incubating here.
Oh, wow.
And these eggs are incubating for male, so they're incubating at about 86 to 87 degrees to be a mix of males and females here. We will incubate, let me see here. So we'll incubate eggs in sets of 2, like this, in vermiculite. And we have a video on our website of how to set up the vermiculite egg container. But if, you know, when I'm pulling eggs in groups, if I catch 4 to 6 eggs, I could fit 4 to 6 eggs in here.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I also pop just 1, 2. For this size, I pop 2 small holes in there for a little bit of fresh air exchange. And for these smaller ones, I just pop, let me see where it is. There's 1 hole in here somewhere.
Yeah, I saw it go by.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Good eye. There's the hole. I pop 1 hole for these smaller containers. These are 3-ounce containers. These are 8-ounce containers, both from webstaurantstore.com. You can buy them from reptile dealers or websites, but you're going to pay like 10 times the cost of buying it from webstaurant.com, going directly to the source, you know?
Go back to this temperature thing and controlling whether you get male or females by temperature.
Uh-huh.
So what do you do? Like if you want females, do you incubate them at a lower temperature than if you want some males?
Yes, sorry. So this is my male incubator that is set for about 87 to 88 degrees. And then do you see all these other incubators I have here? This is another incubator.
They're all females, aren't they?
These are all female incubators. And these hovabators actually make really, really good, cheap female incubators. And so do the reptibators. If you guys know what a reptibator is, it's similar to a hovabator. They're very cheap, very inexpensive to pick up, and they make great incubators for females. They do not make great incubators for males because there's no fans inside of them. And so the temperature fluctuation in there, all of the hot air is at the top and all of the cold air is at the bottom. There's no fan to circulate even temperature. So that's okay when you're incubating for females, because you're incubating at a lower temperature, and a degree or two fluctuation is not going to make that big of a difference. But when you're incubating for males, it's very important that you try to stay close to 89, but you don't go above 91. If you start going above 91 degrees, that's where crinkles, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but geckos will be born with defective eyelids. Their eyelids will be crinkled and in the shape of a V, and they might not be able to see for a decent portion of their life at a certain eyes if it's bad enough. So when you go above 91 degrees, that's when issues start to happen with the eggs. And that's why you want a male incubator that is very, very stable, you know?
Talking about shedding, or I'm thinking about shedding, and I just wanted to, I won't belabor this, but everybody here knows that I've got this, my fourth leopard gecko. I was just given to me a few days ago, and someone had got it to be a pet, and they said that she didn't, you know, make sure the shed came off. So as a result of that, its eyes were fused shut, its eyelids were fused shut. So they were trying to work with it at the store, and of course they're trying to run a store, you know, and they feel like they couldn't feed it and all that. So I took it like a dummy. I brought it home. And so what I did, as I'm a retired nurse, so I started putting ophthalmic ointment on and all that, but I couldn't get all that to soften up. And when I finally could get everything off of it, I saw that its eyes had actually dried up and atrophied, like 2 little grape seeds or something in there. So it's blind. So what I've been having to do to feed it, as you well know, they're stimulated to eat by something running in front of them or chasing something. So that's what I'm trying to do, is retrain it. And I've had to get it hydrated first with some supplements made for geckos. And so now I'm feeding it live crickets and live superworms, but it's because it will try to bite, you know, the tweezers if I tap on it. But it's learned tap means it's going to eat in just a few days. So he's doing okay. But what do you think about that? I mean, the quality of life and that thing. And tell me again, I've forgotten, what's Wiccan's full channel name, so I can tell the mods Wiccan's channel's name. Anybody?
Wiccan's Wicked Reptiles.
Okay, Merdua Wiccan's Wicked Reptiles is where we're going to send people to next. He goes live at 8, I believe. So, all right, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the?
Well, the quality of life.
Quality of life.
And should I just continue to do what I'm doing with it, or?
Well, I'm the type of person that tries to give every gecko the best chances possible. If you don't mind putting in the extra work, is it a baby or is it an adult?
It's about, I would say 2/3. Well, I can grab it and show you this right here. It's about 2/3 grown, I would say.
Okay, if it's 2/3 grown, it stands a really good chance of just having a normal life, other than the fact that you're going to have to assist feed it. If it was a baby, sometimes babies are harder to assist feed because they're very, very small. And in that case, you might want to consider like putting an animal down or euthanizing them. But even then, I usually, if there's an issue with any of our geckos, I usually try the most I can. And if the animal finally gets to a point where I don't think it's going to thrive, then I'll euthanize it. But if it's thriving, if it's surviving, then it would be nice to just let that animal live out its days. I think leopard geckos are really simple animals. I think I don't think that the leopard gecko would necessarily mind being alive as long as you were helping it to thrive or like feed it or take care of it. Oh yeah, he's a little skinny too, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah. He looks a little better, but it takes a while.
Now his stomach looks full. Is it because his tail is skinny that you're saying he's skinny?
Yeah, his tail does look skinny. Now here's something you need to be super, super cautious of with leopard geckos, especially pet store leopard geckos. There is a parasite in reptiles called Cryptosporidium. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it. It's most common in leopard geckos and green tree pythons.
Oh.
Cryptosporidium is often nicknamed sticktail in leopard geckos because it is a parasite that will consume and consume and consume until the leopard gecko is dead. It is 100% lethal. It is not curable by any medicine, by vets or anything like that. If your leopard gecko has crypto, it is a lethal leopard gecko, and the parasites can be passed from that gecko to any other geckos in your collection if you're not washing your hands or isolating that gecko. The parasites can spread and build up in other geckos. So the reason this is common in pet store geckos is because pet stores get their leopard geckos from really, really big breeders that don't have a lot of quality control, you know? So like, for example, in my operation here, even though we're growing and we're fairly large, if I even have an inkling of a leopard gecko potentially even having crypto, that leopard gecko is isolated and observed and watched. And if it doesn't get better, it's sad to say, but that leopard gecko is put down because I cannot afford for whatever that leopard gecko potentially has to spread to the rest of our animals. Now, that has been my protocol for the last 4 years growing our operation. Now our operation is at a point where I'm not worried about crypto being in our operation, because anything that might have potentially had crypto in the early stages, I just put that animal down or I kept it isolated. You know, I don't necessarily think that your gecko is showing signs of crypto exactly, but what also is common in pet stores is pinworms and coccidia. And pinworms and coccidia are also parasites that will suck the life out of a leopard gecko, but they are curable. You can cure pinworm and you can cure coccidia with medication from the vet. You just have to take the gecko to the vet and have them run a fecal exam. And they'll run a full fecal exam of crypto, pinworms, coccidia, and other known parasites. And if the gecko has any of those, then they can tell you your options. If the gecko has crypto, the vet is going to euthanize the gecko. They're going to recommend euthanasia. But if the gecko has pinworms or coccidia, they will recommend treatment for the animal.
Do you know what the treatment is for those parasites?
Yeah, they're probably going to use a generic dewormer that is called like fenbendazole or something like that. I don't know if you've fenbendazole. You can actually buy fenbendazole for like $11 on a website called beardeddragon.co. You can buy it and treat your own animals. However, if you're treating a gecko with fenbendazole that has crypto, the gecko is not going to get better, and you're not going to know what parasites are in that gecko. You know what I mean?
How are you testing if it's getting better?
It will be gaining weight. Yeah. If a gecko is getting better, it'll be gaining weight. So like with your little one, the reason it might be skinny is because it's blind, right? Like it doesn't.
That's what I hope.
Yeah. Like if you look at the fatness of this tail. Like, do you see how the tail is wider than the base of the leopard gecko? On your leopard gecko, the tail at the base, it's like one size, right? Like it goes all the way down the leopard gecko. What you want to see is that tail getting fatter and fatter and fatter. You want to see it to be wider than the base of the tail. That's letting you know that that it's storing up nutrients, and the nutrients are not necessarily getting sucked away by a bunch of parasites or whatever. You know what I mean?
And you said these pinworms could be coming from crickets?
Pinworms can come from crickets, yeah. And they're actually fairly common in the reptile world for being known to be found in crickets. And that's such a tough conversation because, like, crickets are so fun and so common to feed reptiles. It's like, how do you, like, should you avoid that? I don't think the answer is that you should avoid it. I don't think you should avoid crickets. I think the answer is you should just be aware that crickets potentially contain pinworms. And if you start to see your gecko losing weight, you might want to have some of that medication on standby, or you might want to go to the vet and get some of that medication or get a fecal exam done, you know?
So I know a lot of us, or I say some of us, have microscopes and we look at our animals' poop.
Oh, that's pretty cool if you can do that too, yeah.
What would we look for in that? The pinworms are going to be like visible? in the microscope?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you go to bearded if you go to beardeddragon.co, they actually sell fecal exam slides and kits that you can buy, and they also have pictures on their website of what coccidia looks like, what pinworms looks like. I don't know if they have what crypto looks like on there, but you can do a little bit of Google searching or look on beardeddragon.co's website. And to my remembrance, they actually have pictures of what those parasites look like so that you can find it in your own slide, you know?
Now, would any of those parasites transfer to humans or just?
Yeah.
Oh,
I know that there's different forms of crypto that a human can actually become infected with. Crypto in human beings creates diarrhea. And that's another thing you should be aware of. If your gecko, and I'm sorry, your name isn't showing anymore. Was it Bob, right? With the leopard gecko? If
Yes.
your leopard gecko has parasites, another thing that will potentially happen is the leopard gecko's poo will turn green. The leopard gecko's poo will be runny, like diarrhea, or the leopard gecko will be vomiting or regurgitating from the stress that's on its digestive system from the parasites being in it. If your gecko's poo looks normal, like a solid brown with the white urates, what you want to do is, it's going to sound nasty, but look, the next time your gecko has a poo, look in the poo with a toothpick or something. You can visually see pinworms. But if the poo is solid, there's a good likelihood that it doesn't have like crypto or coccidia, because a lot of times crypto and coccidia will come along with discolored poo and runny poo. But getting back to the human side of things, what crypto does in human beings is it causes for bad diarrhea, but it doesn't cause for death or anything worse than that. However, I was told by Bam Bam Geckos, I think it was, that the crypto that is in humans is different, slightly strained than the crypto that is in reptiles. So I don't know much about that. I'd have to do a little bit more research, but I would imagine that some of these parasites are transferable to a certain degree. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I always yell. I know I'm yelling. I feel like the
fine.
camera's here. I get excited or whatever, and then I start
his actual
screaming.
name. Why are we always yelling is his actual YouTube name.
Okay.
We call him Wow, yeah. I just call him Why.
That's cool. That's cool.
Links all night long.
Yeah.
I just want to remind everybody real quick when we end that we're going to go over to Wiccans, and hopefully we have a link in there to follow, and we're going to use hashtag Reptales over there. So sorry.
So everybody who goes over to his stream, give him a hashtag Reptales as we join, and hopefully when we end, we'll all join at the same time and make a splash.
You can super chat him. Wait, is he doing live streams consistently now? I know he wasn't before. Is he doing them every Friday now?
This is the first one I've seen in a while, so we'll see.
So what I did with him one time was I paid $5 for a super chat, and I was like, hey, can you shout out my company name? And he did. So if you guys want to like promote Reptales, maybe like you could create also a super chat sticker.
Doing it a little more covertly. Hey, call us out. Like,
hey, we're still the fish mafia. Hey.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. The thing that I really like about you guys is there is 1,000,001 ball python podcasts out there, but there are very few gecko, bearded dragon, or like just regular lizard or reptile podcasts besides ball pythons. And so like on my channel, every Friday, it's funny, everyone's doing it on Friday, but every Friday I'm probably going to be inviting on specifically leopard gecko people for a podcast, because you don't see a lot of that. You know what I mean? And it's nice to have a community to belong to, or to have fun with, you know? And so
what time on Friday do you go live?
Yeah, what was that?
Good time on Friday.
So it's probably going to be 7 Pacific Standard Time, which is like 10 Eastern Standard Time. So it'll be well past your guys's show, you know. But I also think you guys have a really cool name. It's Reptales. At first, I was thinking it was Tails, which would have been a cool pun, but Tales is a nice pun as well. So either way, it would have been a good pun. But Reptales is pretty cool.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you. Thank
Grasshopper.
you for coming on too. That is awesome.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
I'll definitely promote you guys on our channel because a lot of people just want podcasts and reptile stuff to listen to while they're driving or while they're at work or while they're cleaning their reptile room. And like I said, there's 1,000,001 ball python podcasts to listen to, but there's very few other reptile podcasts to listen to that are consistent. And now you guys are one of the only others of those few that are consistent. You know what I mean? So
Awesome.
Thank you.
I just want to touch on a couple things. My leopard gecko absolutely hates mealworms.
Oh no.
He will not touch them. Superworms, dubio roaches, crickets. He goes nuts over, but mealworms he will not touch.
yeah, that's a good point that Mike brings up. Is on occasion I will hear that from people as well. They'll be like, "Oh, I tried and I tried and I tried and I can't get my leopard gecko to eat mealworms." And my reply to that is, "That's cool. Unless you need your leopard gecko to eat mealworms, don't worry about it. It's fun to feed other stuff. But
Oh yeah,
if you want to force your I don't know if you tried this per se, but if you want to force your leopard gecko to eat mealworms kind of thing, leopard geckos oftentimes can actually go. I had a female leopard gecko not eat for me for 7 months one time, and she barely lost weight. Like she might have lost about half her body size, but leopard geckos can go for extreme amounts of time if they're in a healthy condition without eating. So what I tell some people is if you're trying to convert to mealworms, you could just offer that gecko mealworms. And as long as they're a healthy weight, you don't have to worry about it. If they don't eat for a month, fine. If they don't eat for 2 months, fine. If they don't eat for 3 months, fine. As long as the gecko's not really losing that much weight. But I don't know how much of that you might have tried or if you didn't care that it wasn't eating mealworms. But like some people that I deal with, they're trying to get their leopard geckos on mealworms because they are in a breeding operation and they want to convert everything to the same thing. You know what I mean? But
if mine, if I only have 2 of them or 3 of them, it's all right if they have the other ones, the other insects instead of mealworms.
oh yeah,
yeah, definitely.
I'm not worried that he doesn't want mealworms because he goes gangbusters over everything else, and that's perfectly fine with me. So,
right. Yeah, and that's the best way to do it. Sometimes I have to take myself out of breeder mindset because my mind is so geared towards what's operationally efficient for me. And I have to go back to the mindset of when I first got a leopard gecko at 7 or 8 years old. What was fun to me at that time was watching it chase crickets around the cage, right? I used to have that red light, and I still recommend this to a certain degree. You know those red lights that you could keep on at night and you could watch your leopard gecko like hunting animals at night? A lot of people have started discouraging people from using that nowadays because there was some scientific research that came out to show that reptiles can actually see red light. We thought that they couldn't see red light 20 years ago, but now we found that they can. And so people are like, oh, it's cruel to leave a red light on all night. But in reality, I don't really think it's cruel as long as the gecko has hides to go into, right? Like a dark place to go into. I don't think it's cruel. And if the red light is on at night and the gecko's moving around its cage, I used to love watching leopard geckos hunt crickets at night and just walk around the cage and climb over all its stuff. That was my kid mindset of just having a pet leopard gecko versus like being a breeder operation.
That is pretty cool. And actually reminds us, and I thought I had heard this with my granddaughter, that small kids, it's very common for them to get pinworms. Very common if they're in a school setting or school setting.
You see them picking their butt, they've got worms, we used to say. Yeah. Did you have another question, Mike?
Yeah, just one other thing that I know Dragon Lair brings this up about every stream that we do, and this is not the call call him out or anything like that. But I've been seeing more and more that if you give a reptile UVB light, you don't have to cut back on the calcium. That there hasn't been any recorded cases of a reptile suffering from an overabundance of calcium.
Like calcium deposits?
Yeah. So I was just kind of wondering what your thought was, or
I see Dragon Lair. He seems to know his stuff. He's commenting a lot of knowledgeable stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So I did a lot of research on this too, because I do have outdoor species here in Arizona. I keep my tegus outside year round, and I give them the same type of calcium that I give to my leopard geckos that have no UVB versus my tegus that have tons of UVB. Like Arizona is like the most amount of UVB that you can get year round, right? Mm-hmm. Here's the thing with calcium. Calcium comes in two forms: calcium with D3 and calcium without D3. If an animal has vast amounts of exposure to UVB, it is thought that the reptile does not need any more calcium. Otherwise, you can have what Mike was kind of starting to refer to was the name just spaced on me, but there's actually a term for D3 overdose, where it has the same effect as metabolic bone disease, which is a lack of D3 that makes the bones weak and the animals start having deformed structure and crawling on their elbows. The same thing can happen if you were to Google search reptile D3 overdose. There's some research out there to show that it's possible and that the symptoms are the same as metabolic bone disease, where the animal's bones start to get weak because it has too much exposure to D3. So that is a real thing, but like you were saying, Mike, it's so rare to where I give my outdoor tegus that get 24/7 exposure to ultraviolet radiation from the sun. I still give them D3, and I've never noticed any issues. So the amount of D3 that will be needed to overdose an animal, I think it's such a high amount that we really don't see any recorded cases of it. That being said, it is a scientific thing that if you were to Google search reptile D3 overdose, you'll find some scientific papers that were researched by labs or whatever on it, and there is a little bit of information on there, you know.
Okay.
It's a form of hypercalcemia.
I like to tell people, give your leopard gecko D3. I think it's better that they have more calcium with D3 than less. And then if you start to notice any potential issues, which I've never had anybody notice any potential issues before, if they start to notice a weakening of the gecko's elbows or joints or those kinds of things, then you'll want to remove the D3, obviously, because it's starting to go through D3 overdose. But I have yet to hear of anybody with leopard geckos or bearded dragons or anything actually have an overdose scenario. So I think it's extremely rare and uncommon, you know.
Okay.
Oh my God. Could you come back another time? I still have questions.
Absolutely. I would love to come back anytime, you know.
We'd love to have you back.
I'll get with you for a part
This has actually been like the most engaging, informational, like leopard gecko type of podcast that I've been around in a while. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome to hear too. Awesome to hear.
Yeah. My wife is here. She'll say hi real quick.
Oh.
Hi.
So her name is Whitney. She's super supportive towards the operation here. On her week, she's a teacher. So if you know anything about being a teacher, extremely stressful job. And she teaches 5 to 8-year-olds all week long. So super stressful. And even then, before I hired our part-time employee, she was cleaning gecko cages for like 12 hours on the weekend to help me. So that just shows how supportive she is, and she bends the shows with us and all kinds of things, you know.
Definitely a keeper.
Well, this has been a great
Middle season,
stream. So
pepperoni.
informative, so interesting.
Yeah,
Whether
whatever you want,
you're
I'm good
a
with.
keeper or a newbie, there's tons of information. So thank you very much for coming and sharing all that information.
Yeah, please. And I always like to give, even though I get a ton of spam calls now, I like to be as helpful as possible. So I always give my number out, 480-299-7657. If someone has an emergency in the middle of the night or whatever, I don't care. Text me, call me. If I don't pick up, then leave a voicemail. But
Say it
my
again,
phone,
480.
yeah, 480-299-7657. I know that sometimes people have reptile or leopard gecko emergencies and they're just really worried. I don't mind. Text me any time of day or call. I usually turn my phone on silent when I go to bed, but if it's not on silent and I hear it, I will attempt to pick it up or help somebody out anytime they want. We also have a YouTube channel that has a ton of all of the topics that we were talking about today. I go through like 20 or sometimes even 30-minute videos talking about shipping, care, all of the
And you
supplementation,
have a ton of
human
adorable
hides.
kids.
Yeah, like all of that stuff, you know.
Well, thank
So,
you
but
very
you guys have been great. I've really enjoyed the engaging questions and stuff like that. I didn't think I got to hear from sketchy
Pam.
Mickey Mouse ears too much, but I appreciate you being in here.
She's
And
very
I love
timid and quiet.
the Mickey
She's
Mouse
very-
ears too. So
That's
I think
funny.
you did throw a question in there. I heard a different voice. I heard a different female voice.
Oh yeah,
I
I
think-
was asking you about the eggs and the temperature and stuff.
Yes, yeah, you got your question in there, but it was really fun meeting you all and getting to see you guys.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
She's just so sweet and innocent that she
Mike?
hates interrupting.
Mike,
Yeah.
I can find you. I can find you.
That's funny. So, guys, if you don't know where to find us, go on Facebook, Reptales, because we rotate these streams on the 4 of our channels throughout the year. So, but the common place is going to be on Facebook, Reptales. You'll see our upcoming guests. And if you're interested in being a guest or have some questions you want us to talk about, put them on the Facebook page. We'll all see them. And I appreciate everybody coming out. Hopefully, you'll find a reptile show near you soon. And we're going over to Wiccans and hashtag Reptales. And thank you for posting that. Thank you, mods. Thank you, panel. Appreciate
Awesome
that.
job.
Frank and Whitney. This is so nice. It's so nice of you to come on our channel. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it was. I learned a lot. It was very good.
It was very
Yeah.
interesting.
All right, guys.
Thank you guys. Thanks so much. I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night, guys. Bye.